The idea is you create the assets for the components, and then you turn this into a component. But here is an example of all the assets that went into creating a dropdown. And then your component is going to have variants. So there's a state variant, which is open or closed, and then there is a hover variant. And because this dropdown has 3 different menu items, and each menu item is interactive, then the one hover component, if I click on this, it actually has 4 different states. It has a state of none, where you don't do anything. And then the numbers are just representing the different states of the names of the actual menu items that appear. So number 1 is the techno genre is highlighted. Number 2, rock and roll is highlighted. And number 3, hip hop. So I'll go ahead and show you what the dropdown looks like. So when I play this, and I'm in the prototyping part of Figma. So basically what this is, a dropdown, you click on it, you get your menus. So maybe some of you have a menu like this where you pick a genre, and then you have hovers here. So you can hover, and then you can click on that again, you can close it. So the way it works is first you create your components and you go through that process. So I could probably do this. I could probably take all of this and copy and paste it into a new Figma document, because I basically started by just creating the buttons. I created the little icon to represent the opening and closing of the menu. And then I went through the process of creating the close button, where it's just the genre button by itself, and then the open version. And then really what should be done here is creating versions where I have techno highlighted and rock and roll highlighted and hip hop highlighted. But if I start like this, if I start with just this one right here, copy that and go into a new Figma file. So the idea is first you have to design the component. Like you have to figure out what that component is going to be. So this really started with just the genre button. So the upward pointing icon means that the menu is open. But if I take this and just go to this button and invert it like that, this is the menu closed. And so the way this works is you highlight all of those assets, the type, the rectangle, the icon, you highlight those together. And first I gotta make sure, okay. And then you just click on this little icon up here. It's the 4 little squares in a diamond shaped pattern. And you click on that and you create a component. And then once you create the component, you have this variant section right here. And so you can hit plus, and that creates a variant. And what it did was it basically duplicated the button in the component. And it's a component because it has this purple dashed outline and it says component. And in your layers, it says component as well. So I have variant up here, and then I have a variant down below. So basically duplicates the button. And so when you go into layers, you can build out your component here, and you can basically change the information here. You can also designate properties for this. So right now, property 1 equals variant 2, and you see it under variants right here, property 1 and variant 2. And so what you can do is actually change this. So if it's a button, instead of, you can call this, you can call it like, you can just call it button, and then say, you can say button 1 equals, I'll just say button equals closed. So button equals closed, and then you can go down here to this one, and you know which one you're working on. If you turn off the visibility, actually the top one should be the closed one. Button equals, and I'll actually say button 1. I'll say button 1 equals closed, and button 1 equals open. And so what you can do now, if you want to actually have the true open state, so this arrangement below represents the open state. So I can take all of this information here, I can copy it, I can go into the component, click on that open state, actually delete it, and then paste the open state here. And one thing you have to be careful of actually is, instead of deleting the actual open part of that, I can delete the information inside and then paste the new button inside. So now I can push this down, and then I can go into that component. And what happens is sometimes the information comes out of this box. So the component box is something that you can adjust. So I can drag that box down and I'll probably move it as well. So I'll probably move the whole component. So I'll move it up here, make this box bigger. And then inside of this, I can grab this open section, all that information, and then move it down, everything. Sometimes it's easier just to use the arrow keys on your keyboard, because when you select things, it might select something specifically. So now I have this open and close kind of variation here. And another thing I might want to set is the hover. So each one of these little sections is going to have a hover that it's going to be set to something. So you can add another property here. So you can go back into open here and say comma and say hover equals none. So I'm going to change that eventually to have numbers for this. But now you look over here, it says hover equals none and button 1 equals open. And same with the close button. I'm going to say hover equals none. And so when you go into assets, now you have your button right here, and I can drag that button out. And then what you can do is you can see the states. So the states that are applied through that variant option are now here. So I can click on close and see if I did that. I think button 1 close. Actually, this probably should be, so I have a little mistake. I should probably make sure that if button 1 is lowercase, then for the open, for the close one, then the open one has to be lowercase too. And I can actually change it here and say open. And then I can delete this. It doesn't need this state down here. So this should be, so if I double click on this, I can see the formula here. And the formula is you have a property equal to a state of some sort that you create. Right now I have 3 states. I only need 2. I just need open and close. So I'm going to delete the state there. And then this is already good. So button 1 equals close, making sure that it's lowercase is important. And so I can go into the button here from that component that I dragged out, and underneath this property that I created called button 1, I can click on that and I can go to open, and then I can go to close. So I can change that. So now the component has 2 separate states. It's built into the, so if you have any type of button, you can do an up and down, change the color, and create these variations, and you can give it as many properties as you want, really. Typically, you wouldn't have a lot, but for this type of drop down, what I would have is, I'm just going to clean this up a little bit. That doesn't have to be as tall. So each one of these sections would be highlighted. Techno, rock, and hip hop would be highlighted when I hover over them. So what I have to do with this is adjust it a little bit. So I can adjust it here. I can make changes here. It looks like I have a box underneath techno for some reason. I can see it right there. Is it there? Yeah. So what I want to do is I have a box, a rectangle underneath rock that's like this gray color. Techno and hip hop should have boxes as well. So what I do is I actually go into the component in the layers, and you can hit Command D, and that's going to duplicate that rectangle, which is underneath the text. So it's layered here. And so let's say I want another rectangle underneath hip hop. I'll go into the component in the layers, and I'll drag that layer down beneath techno. And then I'll use my mouse keys and just push it up. So now I have pushing it up, and I'm just eyeballing it until it snaps into place. And for now, I'll make this box white. So I'm going to change the fill to just white. And then I will do the same thing with this box. I like to use the colored boxes. They're just easier to see. So I'll do a Command D on rectangle 5, which is underneath the word rock. I'll do that. And I'll just drag this up so it's underneath hip hop. So everything is aligned and going together. And then I'll use the arrow keys again, drag it down, and then change this to white as well. So I have a white swatch here. So the fill is white. What you do now with this is you can duplicate some of these components in here, and you basically can add some additional variants to this. So I can add another variant, and then you have this little plus sign. So once you add a variant to that, plus sign will let you add additional variants. So what I really need for this is to have a drop down for each category. So techno, rock, hip hop should all have drop downs. So I'm going to move this over because that's the actual component. And so what you usually have to do is increase the size of the component frame that dotted rectangle, because if you don't, what happens is you can drag stuff out of the component and it's no longer part of the variant. So right now I have 3 variants. I have a closed state, I have an open state, and then this genre down here, this text down here, I'm going to drag up just so everything's nice and aligned. Maybe I'll drag it here. Oops, and I dragged it a funny way. I will align it with the open state, and then I'll do some adjustments here. So I want to take the little downward pointing icon and just rotate that. So now it should match the open state. And then what I can do here is I can grab in the open state, grab all of this information from hip hop to techno, copy that, and I just have to find my, okay, so I want to copy that and put it up in here so I can paste that. And then I just drag it down again. And I think I'm missing a rectangle behind everything as well. So I just drag that down. If you use the mouse, sometimes you just grab stuff you didn't intend to. And the only thing that is missing is this outer box, looks like rectangle 7. So I'll copy that as well. Nope, it's not rectangle 3. So I'm going to copy rectangle 3 and paste it in there as well. So now I have that. And you can change the order. So I can just drag this down to the bottom. See what happens when I use the mouse. It actually pulls it out of the component sometimes. So something you just got to drag it back in. So now I have, I think some of these may be a little off. It looks like I got a duplicate here too. So now I have this other state, and this state is going to actually be another hover state. So what I can do here is, and I'm going to have to change closed to open. So that's an open state. And then I'll change my hover state to 1. So what happens now with this is you're not going to see anything, but let's say this is the state. If I click on techno, the box behind the word techno should highlight maybe with a different gray so I can tell that it's a button. So I'm going to select the box behind techno and change it to a darker gray. So that's like a highlighted aspect of it. And so if I go back to the component, which you think is over, or I can just go back to assets and drag out that component again. So it's been updated with another variant. So now if I click on it and if I go to variant, I have open and close. And in addition to hover, I have none, and 1 is going to give me techno highlighted. So I can see none. And I think 2, I might have to adjust some things here. But the next thing I'll do is in the component is I'll add another variant. So you can hit it on the plus sign, or what you can actually do, which is a little bit easier, is go into layers and find open 1 and just option drag that whole thing. And now I have another one, but this time instead of techno being highlighted, hip hop's or rock's going to be highlighted. So rock is that lighter gray color. So I'll make it a darker gray. And then techno is just going to be white. So that's not highlighted. And then I'll go into open 1 and change the hover state to 2. So now when I click on this component here, I can change that hover state to 2. I can change it to 1, or I could go back to none. And so I'll do the same thing. I'll go back up to the open 2 state, and I will shift click and drag, and it's still within the dotted line. So everything stays there. And then I'll make this state 3, and then I will change the rock back to the original gray color that it was. And then I'll click on hip hop, and I'll make that the dark gray. And so now when I go back to the component down below, and I got a state of 1, a state of 2, and a state of 3. I think one of the issues is they're not really aligned, so they're not stacking properly. So I might go back to this component here of open and none, and I might actually delete that and then drag out one of these by hitting option and shift. So I'll go to component 1, drag around it, and then I'll just make techno white because it's not going to have a hover state. But for this one down here, it's down here. And so instead of open and 1, I'm going to change that hover state back to none. So I think that's going to fix it a little bit for me. So now when I go back to the component down below that I dragged out, hover state of none. Yeah, so everything's lined up. So things weren't lined up, but by option shift dragging and deleting one thing and the layers on one side, I can go back and make sure it's lined up, because that's going to matter when you actually create the prototype for this. So now I have the component set up. The challenge is to actually make this a working component. So I already dragged it out here, and I can go back here and go to the original state of closed. So this is where it starts. And so I have to build this out. If I click on play right now, it's not going to really do anything. I don't have a frame. So the first thing I want to do is have a frame. So this would represent the frame of the app. So I'm just going to take the frame tool and drag around the component. So now it has a frame. And we've created all these variants, but in the prototype mode, the variants don't do anything. You have to actually configure the interactivity. So if I go into prototype mode, I click on this, it does nothing because I have to set that up. You have to set that up in the prototype part of Figma. So I have the frame here and I have the button. So the key to doing this now is to go into prototype. And what we actually need to do is actually drag out the component. So I'm going to click on the component option. Actually, I can probably drag the whole frame. I can do this. I can drag the whole frame, option, click, drag that out, and then click on the component, go back into design. And then for the state, I'm going to pick open. So that's the open state. And then I'm going to, I can do this all in design, actually. I can drag this out again and then click on the component and then hover is going to be set to 1. Drag this out again. And I'll just hit Command D and duplicate that one last time. So Command D, if you option shift drag something out in Figma and you hit Command D, it will move it the same amount of distance that you dragged it out at. It's like a universal shortcut. Illustrator does the same thing. So for the frame 4, it's going to be hover state 2. And for frame 5, it's going to be hover state 3. So you're creating the ability to like create the simulation of a drop-down menu on, let's say, a website or in the app, but you don't need to code it. You can do it here in Figma, but you do have to create these different states. So if I go into prototype mode now, what I can do is create my interactivity. So I can click on my first component, go to interactions and hit the plus sign. And then the button is going to be like an on-click action. So I click on click and I make sure I have on-click selected. And then the action is below that. So underneath none, you go to open overlay. And then you pick the overlay. So the frames are technically your overlay. So you can pick frame 2, or what you can do is you can drag this over here and drag it to the component. So for the animation, you can say, actually, instead of navigate above, I have to make sure it's open overlay. And then the type of overlay is manual. So that should go right on top. And it doesn't look like it's right on top. So what I think I need to do with the frames actually is, I think the components need to fit inside the frames. Let's see, if it's frame 2, what I'll do is this. I'm going to fit it in the frame and then select the frame and then like this. And then when I go back to interaction, delete that interaction. So it's going to be click, on click, open overlay, frame 2. And then it's going to be set to manual. So now it's right on top. So that's key. You have to fit this in the frame. So on click, it's going to go right on top. And then the other thing is, after I click, if I drag outside, I want it to close. So I'll say close when clicking outside. And then the animation is set to instant. So it's going to happen immediately. So now when I go and look at this, I can click on the little playhead next to the flow. So this is, sometimes it has to refresh. And now when I click on this, it opens. And then when I click out of it, it closes. I think it's not perfectly aligned, but that's okay. I think you get the idea. The other one was much better aligned. So now that I have that established, what I probably could do actually is I don't want to go ahead and fix all of these because these have to be, the frame should be perfectly around the component. So I'm actually going to delete these. And then I'm going to go back and then grab this frame here and do an option shift drag and then hit Command D and then go into design mode and then go into genre for the component. And so frame 1 is actually hover state number 1. I'll go to frame 4, pick genre. That's going to be hover state number 2. And I'm going to go to frame 5 in genre, and that's going to be hover state number 3. Then I can go back into prototype mode. Oops, I didn't want to go there. I want to go here into the prototype section here, and I can do my hover states. So the way that this is going to work is when I hover over techno, the box that says techno, when I hover over this one, it's going to go to frame 3, which is my techno frame. And so in the interaction details, I'm going to change it to while hovering, and it's going to go into frame 3. And then I think I can leave I'll probably do like instant here. And then to test it out, I'm going to, it's a little playhead here. So I click down, and then actually it shouldn't really close up like this, but it's doing what it should be doing. It's going to that frame. Oh, I don't think I want, it should be open overlay. It shouldn't be, it should, while hovering, I think I should say swap overlay. So let's test this one now. And then I'll do rock. That's going to connect to the one where rock is highlighted in frame 4. And it's going to do the same thing. It's going to be while hovering, swap overlay. And then I'll click on the hip hop box and then go to frame 5. And then while hovering, swap overlay. So let's see if that works. So it's doing the hovers. And let me go back. I should really start here with this one. So it makes a difference which frame you start with. So I click on that, opens up, and now they hover. So that's generally the idea behind creating a drop down.